The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 17th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them. And from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up, and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The Gospel of the Lord. So while I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go and ski on Zugspitze. Zugspitze is a mountain at the beginning of the Alps, right on the German-Austrian border. And when you go up on top of Zugspitze, you're actually skiing on a glacier. And it sounded like a lot of fun, so I thought I should go do that. And some of you saw pictures that I posted on Facebook about the ski trip. And if you saw those pictures, you saw it was a bright, sunny day. Beautiful, cloudless weather. The snow was perfect. It was so great. I skied until my legs told me, you can't go anymore. That was the second day. The first day could not have been more different. First day, this should have been a sign to me. I went to go on the cable car to take it up to the top of the mountain, and there were no lines. It's like, this is great. I'm going to have the mountain all to myself. And I nearly did, because people who lived there were smart enough to realize that the mountain was all covered in clouds. And when you got up to the top, it was shrouded in fog. The wind was blowing pretty hard. It was snowing. The visibility was terrible. But you know, I'm on the top of the mountain, I should try to ski it anyway. So I tried to ski a couple of these runs where they had set up these little poles to show you where the trails were groomed and how you had to ski between these 2 little poles. And it took me a little while to figure that out, because if you didn't ski between the poles, you skied off into the deep snow. I learned that when I skied off into the deep snow, that I should ski between the poles. But after a couple runs, the conditions kind of really deteriorated. So I went back into the ski lodge and I sat there and I waited for things to get better. They didn't. But the wind started to die down just a little bit, and I thought, well, I should at least try to give it a shot one more time. So I went out, put on my skis, and I skied down this little hill to the base where the ski lift was. But as I did that, the wind started to pick up again. And the snow was blowing around me. Because it's above the tree line, everything was white. The ground was white, the sky was white, the mountains that I couldn't see in the distance because of the fog were white. And as I got near the base of the hill, I had this sensation that I was moving forward, but I wasn't sure. I actually had to look down at my skis and see that the snow was blowing across them to realize that I had stopped. I couldn't even figure out which end was up, literally. It was the most disorienting experience I have ever had in my life. It was almost a whiteout. It was almost a complete whiteout. And as much as I like skiing, even I was willing to say, hey, you know what? This is dangerous. So I took off my skis, and I climbed back up the hill, and that was it for day 1 of skiing. But I thought about that disorienting experience on the mountain when I was reading and getting ready for today's sermon, because I thought, you know what? That disorienting experience on a mountain was also what Peter and James and John experienced with Jesus on that day of transfiguration. Jesus had invited the 3 of them to come up the mountain and pray with him, and they had probably done that before. They were probably looking forward to it. And like any other kind of mountaintop experience that we might envision in our minds, they probably were looking forward to a time of beautiful scenery and peaceful days and a wonderful, refreshing spiritual experience so that they could go back down the mountain feeling, this is great. That's not what happened for them either. Their experience also was totally disoriented. They were surrounded by clouds, and it obscured their vision. They heard a voice, but they couldn't quite tell where the voice was coming from. And they were confused by this transfiguration, this transformation of Jesus, whose face and clothing shined in a way they had never seen before, and all of a sudden there's this appearance of Moses and Elijah. It was totally disorienting for them. Apparently they didn't know which end was up either. So they fell down on the ground, afraid to get up. And they probably would have stayed there for a while, stuck in their fear and their disorientation, except for the fact that Jesus came over to them, touched them, told them to get up and not be afraid. And when they did get up, they saw Jesus, and they kept their focus on him. And it was that focus on Jesus that empowered them to move forward and not to be so disoriented anymore. So as they're coming down the mountain, Jesus told them not to tell anybody about this vision until after he was raised from the dead. But I think that he did want them to remember the lesson of the vision on the mountain. And the lesson that they were supposed to learn was this. They were supposed to know to keep their eyes on Jesus and to stay focused on him whenever they felt afraid, confused, or disoriented. Because if they thought that the vision on the mountaintop was the last time that following Jesus was going to be confusing, frightening, or disorienting, they were in for a rude awakening. Because Jesus was taking them down to go on the journey to Jerusalem, a journey in which he was going to be crucified and killed. And that was going to be the most frightening, disorienting, confusing experience of their lives. And so maybe the reason Jesus wanted them to have this experience was not so that they could simply go, oh wow, I saw Jesus in all his glory, but rather so that they could remember that whenever in the course of their lives of following Jesus, they somehow began to feel afraid, confused, or disoriented, they could remember to keep their focus on him. And for them and for us, sometimes staying focused on Jesus means listening for Jesus' voice in the midst of all the other noise and the confusion that's going on around us in the world. Because even the generalized voice of God that spoke to James and John and Peter on the mountaintop, that wasn't enough. That just frightened them all the more. They needed the actual personal voice of Jesus saying to them, don't be afraid. It was that voice that was able to help them to be able to get up and not be afraid anymore. And I think that, as we get ready for Lent and we think about some of the things that we might do as kind of Lenten preparation, we often talk about things like, spending more time in prayer and Bible study and things like that. The point of those things is not simply for us to feel like, we're becoming more spiritual and we're learning great Bible facts. If that happens, that's wonderful too. But the real point of spending time in devotion and in Scripture and in prayer is to focus on Jesus, to focus on listening for Jesus in our lives. In lives that also for us are sometimes so full of noise and confusion and disorientation that literally we don't know which end is up. But if we're going to be able to stay focused on Jesus, then we've got to be able to actually practice listening for his voice so that we can be able to be empowered also to move forward in an often disoriented world. Sometimes for us too, as for those first disciples, staying focused on Jesus is about practicing following in Jesus' footsteps. Probably getting up and walking down the mountain was still difficult for people who had been so afraid they had lost their balance and fallen over down and couldn't get up. Jesus says, come on, let's go. And the reason they were able to actually go down the mountain was they actually just sort of physically watched Jesus and they followed in his footsteps so that they knew the way. Sometimes that's the simple thing of just following in somebody's footsteps, or ski tracks. I did that also during that first day of skiing. I couldn't see where the lines were, but I could see people ahead of me. And sometimes I just stayed in those tracks and I followed them down because I knew that would be the path. And I think what Jesus was doing with some of those first disciples was to say, you know what, when you see me doing things, whether it's feeding those who are hungry, standing with those who feel left out, forgotten, standing up for the truth in the midst of a bunch of places where people are not wanting to hear the truth, that's something for you to imitate and do. And often for us, and we talk about doing things during the season of Lent, when we practice doing those kinds of things, helping our neighbors, standing up for the truth, doing those kinds of things is not just so that, we can suffer because suffering is good for the soul and good for us and that kind of stuff. It's supposed to be helping us to practice doing what Jesus did. Because one of the ways to stay focused on Jesus is to practice doing what he did so that we can be Jesus' representatives and helpers in a world which is often disorienting and confusing for others. That's part of staying focused. And I think maybe for us too, as for those first disciples, staying focused on Jesus is about giving up trust in ourselves. Peter and James and John fell down in fear because finally in the end, all of this stuff going on, the voice from heaven, the clouds, the fog, the shining of Jesus, the appearance of Moses, it was just too much. They couldn't deal with it by themselves, and they just fell to the ground. They couldn't deal with it by themselves. They would have stayed there, except Jesus told them that they could trust him to walk with them. That's what empowered them to get up. They didn't anymore think somehow or other we've got to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps and handle this all by ourselves. Much of, and we talked a little bit about this at the Theology on Tap on Monday, much of the giving up of stuff that people do during Lent, and we make jokes about, I give up Brussels sprouts because I hate Brussels sprouts, stuff like that. But all the stuff that we're really supposed to give up in Lent, or think about giving up, is basically always comes down to giving up our focus on ourselves and our trust in ourselves. Because so often we end up saying things like, I can't live unless I have this stuff. Well, yeah, you can. But you don't start to learn that you can actually trust something other than yourself and your stuff until you're willing to give up a little bit of it. And that's what Jesus was calling Peter and James and John to do, to give up trusting in themselves for the journey. And that's often what we have to do if we're going to be able to live in a disorienting and confusing world, to be able to give up the trust that we so often place in ourselves and our own abilities to control things, so that we can be able to more fully focus on trusting Jesus. Because life is often for us, the journey of our lives, is often, as for those first disciples, scary and confusing and disorienting. And if you find yourself in a ski resort where it's a whiteout and you can't see which end is up, then, taking your skis off and walking back up the hill and calling it quits, that is the appropriate response. But that doesn't really work for most of the things that we find in life are scary and disorienting and confusing. So instead, what Jesus calls us to do when we find ourselves confused, overwhelmed, and disoriented by life, he comes to us also. He calls us also to watch and listen for his touch and for his call in our lives to get up and not be afraid. And like those first disciples, Jesus calls us to follow him boldly, even in the midst of a disorienting world, by staying focused on him and by trusting in his presence and his guidance in our lives.